Well, I have the pleasure of being with Mike Lemonds this morning, president of DxTx Pain Spine. Mike, for those who know you or want to hear your voice more, and maybe for those of you who don't know you and would like an introduction, could you just give us a little bit of background on who you are, what your role is at DxTx, and maybe where you're joining us today?
Yeah, thanks, Owen. Yeah, so I'm joining from just north of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Summer's finally starting to hit us here, so it's really nice. So my role is I'm president of DxTx. Prior to DxTx, I was the president of ProCare Pain Solutions, which was part of North American Partners in Anesthesia. So similar type company, not nearly as robust as what we provide at DxTx, but it was a really good introduction into interventional pain management. And I was there for 4.5 years before coming over to DxTx and about 3.5 years ago.
So, Mike, you've had one of the most fascinating career trajectories that I've come across. You've kind of done a little bit of everything, both within the healthcare world and outside of it, from the clinical side to starting your own business to running massive organizations. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about your story for folks that may not be as familiar with it?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that it's as unique as as you say, but because I think there's a common thread that has been throughout my career. But I grew up in Flint, Michigan, so working class family, working class parents, great upbringing. Was fortunate to play college baseball, which kind of exposed me to some things. Then I was able to get my master's degree from the University of Michigan in social work. So the first part of my career, the first third of my career was I worked as a clinical social worker, and I was a psychotherapist. I worked in inpatient programs for adolescents. I worked in intensive outpatient programs as well as an outpatient therapist. At one point, oddly enough, the psychologist in the next door to me, in the office next to me, his wife was a pharmaceutical rep for J&J. And he said, you'd probably be a good sales guy. I was able to build a very large practice and had a long waiting list because I would go out and I was promoting what we do and what I would do. So I'll check that out. And so I actually got the job. I became a pharmaceutical rep. I was very blessed to have a lot of success because I had some great partners. And that taught me really early on that I want to always surround myself with people that are better than me because they will help me along the way too. So I had some fabulous partners. We had some really high individual finishes in the country. Then I became a district manager. And, once again, my whole goal was I'm going to hire 11 reps. We were a startup district in Louisville, Kentucky. We covered a little bit of Ohio, Kentucky, a little bit of Indiana. And I said, I'm going to hire 11 reps that are all better salespeople than me. And I'm going to just knock down barriers for them and help them be able to success. We finished top 10 in the country 2 years in a row, our first 2 years. And then I was moved to the corporate office. And then that's when I really got into the sales and marketing piece. And then from J&J, I was recruited out of J&J because it was my first opportunity for a senior leadership position. And I became president of a regional ambulance company. So it got me into EMS. So I spent really most of the next 11 years in EMS. I was the president of that company, which we more than doubled in size while I was there, which I was very proud of. Had three best years in company history. But then I started my own company in Indianapolis and spent 8.5 years as an entrepreneur starting an ambulance company. And we grew that business too. And we became the second largest ambulance service in the Indianapolis market. So I was very proud of that. In 2017, I sold that company and went to ProCare Pain Solutions. And ProCare was my entry into the interventional pain space. And that's what brought me back to Michigan also. We were living in Indianapolis at the time, or a suburb of Indianapolis. And that brought me back to Michigan. So it was kind of full circle. But even though they're different industries, they're all healthcare. And the approach that I took, and I remember taking this when I interviewed, I'd never been in sales. I was a therapist. I didn't know about sales, but what I did know is you engage people, and it's pretty simple. You find out what do they need, and then what do you have to help meet that need or change that behavior. If that's selling a product, if that's changing a behavior that you're dealing with, through therapy. That's a behavior we're trying to change, within our organization. So you identify the need, you come up with a plan, and then you reinforce behavioral change. That all those things are the same, whether you're a therapist or you're a leader of an ambulance company, or if you're a leader of an interventional pain management company. It's all the same philosophy. So I've used that, and I think it starts with listening to people and finding out what they need. And I think that that's one of the things that we do best at DxTx is, I feel like my whole job in my day, like what does my day look like? It's internal. It's working with my internal team and our department heads. Then it's partnership. It's with our physician partners and our physician leads and finding out what they need so that me or my team can knock down barriers so they can be successful. And then the other part of my day is external, like who outside of our organization can help us succeed, either through better pricing or providing educational opportunities for our practices and our team. So that's how I view it, as finding out what that need is, developing a plan to execute against it, and then reinforcing that change.
I'd love to just double click a little bit into kind of each aspect of those roles. I'll call it kind of the clinical portion, the sales portion, and the entrepreneurial portion of that career. On the clinical side, are you able to share any stories, from your time, kind of with wearing that hat, and maybe how that thread rolls through to what you're doing today?
Yeah, some of the most rewarding things that ever occurred happened during that time in my entire life. One story was a young teenage male that I was working with, and I'm going to preface this by saying this was pre-Columbine. So you hadn't heard a lot about school shootings at that time. This is a guy that for a year he came in and just slowly building trust and slowly being able to know that I wasn't somebody against him. And I spent a lot of time just listening and just building that rapport. And it took a long time. And at some point, almost out of nowhere, Owen, he told me that he had fantasies of laying in the ditch as people came out of school with a rifle and shooting his classmates. And the fact that he was able to finally bring that out, and we spent a lot of time, and with him and his parents, and making sure that we dealt with all of those issues that were triggering that isolation and that anger, that he absolutely thrived. And he was that loner in high school that he went to, ended up in the right college for him, and developed a really good support system and friend group, and would check in every couple years for quite a while. And as an adult, I knew that he was doing really, really well, and that was just so rewarding to me. Now that was probably one that really stands out. But there's a lot of stories like that it didn't have anything necessarily to do with anything profound that I said. It just had to do with giving somebody an opportunity to be heard and know that you listen to them with sincerity, and maybe offer some tips here and there. And I've kind of like taken that approach to people throughout my entire career.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me the shift into sales was not like a sudden move. You kind of had one foot in both worlds for a while. What was that
I
like?
did. I did. I didn't know I told you that. Yeah, I did. It was because I loved what I did. So I actually kept a practice. So 2 nights a week, from like 6 until 9 p.m. I would see some patients, and then all day Saturday. So it kind of kept my foot in the door and kind of nourished that need I still had while I was developing into the selling world and at J&J. And I finally did. I had to give that up when I was promoted to district manager, and we moved to Kentucky from Michigan at that time. And so I actually worked clinically until about almost 2003.
Wow.
So yeah, so I did that for about 15, 16 years.
And working with physicians as a rep is obviously a very different relationship than when you're a clinician, and also when you're president of TxTx. But what are some of the lessons that you still carry from those times?
Yeah, the biggest lesson, and I think this is something that's really, really helped me, and it happened really early on, is that no matter what we think we know, they can usually take it to a different level. So I really try to have a very clear line between what I'm providing for them from a business standpoint or clinical support standpoint and actual clinical actions. I'm not a physician, so I don't ever tell them how to practice medicine.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that I found out really early on when I was calling on a GI doctor, and that you come out so fired up and you know more about you certainly know more about your drug than they do or your device. You know more about it than that physician does. But that doesn't mean you know more about biology and treating patients than they do. And they have us so fired up coming, and I felt like I knew everything about it. And I had a guy absolutely put me in my place. He sat me down, knew I was a new rep, but I was a little older, right? And he just set me straight. And from that day on, I've never ever talked to a physician like that again. And it's been really helpful to not try to tell them how to practice medicine, but give them the tools that they need to be successful.
Makes sense. I grew up in a household with two physicians, so I think I may have learned that lesson earlier than you did. But
Yeah.
and then when you started your own business in EMS, what was that like? I mean, you went from kind of working within a massive organization to leading one to then kind of going out on your own. Can you kind of take us back to that time in your life?
Yeah, scary and exciting, both. It was at the time we were in a recession. So this was in 2007, and no, it was 2009. Correction, 2009. It was in 2009, and we were in a recession, so there wasn't a lot of like money available. So I had to go out and raise some funds on my own, just from private individuals that wanted to invest in the company. And also then I had to literally take out an equity loan on my house. But what I thought at that time was like, I'm either going to kind of go back into big company and probably back into to the pharma world, because I was only 3 or so years removed from pharma. I could have jumped right back into that. But I thought, I have this entrepreneurial itch to me, and I know this business, and I know we can be successful. And I was either going to take a swing at that time or never again. So I took that swing, and we had young kids, and it was scary. And I had, we were living in Kentucky, and I started it in Indianapolis. So it was a lot of time and a time away. And I was so fortunate that my wife is incredibly supportive and stepped in, and we just did what we had to do. But nothing was more rewarding career wise than being able to build that from nothing. I remember on day one, we had one ambulance, we had, you know, two or three people, and we had the dispatch set up and we're ready to go. And the phone did not ring until maybe three, and I'm out marketing, you know what I mean? But I'm just calling back, and the phone didn't ring. We did one transport on day one. We did zero transports on day two. So that was like scary. And then we slowly started building, and we slowly getting our name out there, and people started landing some contracts, and we just built it right from scratch. And then 8.5 years later, we'd we'd done pretty well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know your wife is in the medical field as well. Was she helping at all within the EMS front, or were you guys kind of splitting duties there?
No, so like kind of like with a lot of startups, right? That are family owned startups. She did, but she was my HR director, so she handled all of the HR stuff. And fortunately, she jumped in, and she's very smart, and she learned what she needed to do, and she learned the different laws that were related to Indiana. So she handled HR, she handled all of our payroll, and she did that until the day we sold.
I feel that, you having that experience starting your own business, taking out that loan against your house, reaching out to, friends and family in your network, and really putting it all on the line. I sense that gives you a much greater appreciation for what the physician entrepreneurs that we partner with have gone through to build their practices, their surgery centers, taking that personal risk and really respecting that aspect of it that, I think a lot of people that have never done it just don't fully appreciate.
They have a lot on their plate, and you know, a lot of the things that they're facing that draws them away from actually being a physician, just dealing with the pressures of reimbursement and documentation and finance and accounting and all the things outside of just treating patients, which is why they went to medical school to begin with. Yeah, I definitely have some empathy for what they were going through, and motivates me to be that partner for them so that they can do what they do best.
And how did you first hear about the company and what brought you here?
Yeah, so DxTx hit the map as kind of an up and comer in our space. Fortunately, you and one of the other founders, Jack Freeze, had a connection with our equity sponsor at American Securities. And so that connection was made. And DxTx being a startup company, we were introduced that maybe at ProCare, some of the infrastructure we had built would be able to partner with them. And I remember when I was putting together my strategic plan, DxTx was actually part of it, and to increase our partnership at ProCare and see if we could do more with DxTx. So that made a very much an impression on me, meeting both you and Jack at that time. Fast forward to 2 or 3 years later, and DxTx was really growing and really making an impact in the space. And so when I was looking to make a move, you guys are the first ones I called.
And we're so happy you did. It's been wild, just the growth that we've had. Obviously, since we first met you and since you joined the team, it's been really, really transformational. So I really appreciate all that you've done. Are you able to think back to your first week or your first month at DxTx and maybe just share a little bit about what life was like then, and compare that to maybe a typical week for you today?
Yeah, it was unique. It was something that it's hard to imagine because we're just coming out of COVID. So at that time, I came from a much more traditional company, brick and mortar. We were in a 5-story building, and so in a very, very large company, we kind of struggled with the remote and how we were going to make that work and what our cadence and communication would be. So since DxTx started as far as their leadership as a remote company, that was already built and it was all pretty new to me. So that first week of learning just the language of like Trello, and I had never heard that before. And so that first week was a mix of exciting, overwhelmed, and a funny story was just watching, we have some just brilliant young leaders in this company that have a skill set that I just didn't come up with, like watching how you guys were working Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that on a Zoom call. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure that they're not going to want to see what I can do there. But what a great mix. So yeah, that first week was, and you felt just that whole startup feel at that time, 3.5 years ago. We still have some of that, but our infrastructure now, comparing it to now, is just much, much greater. A lot of those things that we work through and building the cadences and how we look at our information, just much more sophisticated as a company and with a lot more people. So we have a lot more people that are helping provide all that. And there's a lot of cross training and touching a lot of pieces of the business. We still have a lot of that small company feel, but I think we have a much more structure than we did in that first week.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, we definitely have come a long way. Added some phenomenal team members, promoted many folks up from the practice level to help at the broader level. So yeah, it's been awesome to see that growth. What would you say is something that people might not realize about your role, or kind of the executive leadership team that you oversee, that you think might be helpful for them to hear?
Yeah, I think that they would be surprised at how in depth that we are looking at what's going on at their practice, and that chain of communication that we have. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that nursing staff or that they're talking directly to me or to my team in some cases, but the communication between the practice administrator to our regional directors to our VPs that make it very rapidly that we have just a lot of transparency into what is going on a day-to-day basis so that we can help and intervene or knock any barriers down. And I think, as you grow, and we put some things in place, like, so that they hear a little bit more from us, and doing something like this, they can see what we do. And I think they'd be a little surprised at just the level of detail that we are observing from afar.
Within kind of some of that infrastructure building and some of the detail that you're referencing, are there any particular projects that you're especially proud of that either you've completed or the broader team?
Yeah, a couple things. I think when you look at our incentive comp program for our APPs, I think it's unique. When I look at what other people are doing, it's very aligned with what we do and in our mission and treating the source of pain and an interventional approach. So APPs in a lot of areas, they're just doing a lot of E&Ms, a lot of med management, and we take a different approach. So I'm really proud of how we've put that together. And we have some of the most highly compensated APPs in the country, and especially in the space. The other thing that I'm really proud of what we've done is the development of our CMO and CCO, our Chief Medical Officer, our Chief Clinical Officer. We have two fantastic people, Dr. Ramesh Gaith and Dr. Shio Patel, that lead that group. We work really, really closely with them, and the touch that they put on it helps bring a whole network together. And we're from Denver to Fort Lauderdale, and a lot of places in between. I'm very proud of it, and it continues to develop.
And kind of taking you back to a little bit on the personal side, some of the personal reflection, how would you say you have grown since joining DxTx?
Yeah. It's been just like an injection of energy as well as growth too. It's looking at things. I come from a pretty traditional background. I've worked for Johnson& Johnson, which is a very traditional, great, fantastic company, and some very large companies. And I've had also some entrepreneurial endeavors in my past, but these past 3.5 years, just looking at things through a different lens, being able to pressure test some of the things that I've viewed forever, right? And being kind of open to looking at just different tools and different technology, and in looking at the benchmarks that we've been able to develop as a team. That's all helped me grow. And honestly, just being around just really, really smart, motivated people helps me, because there's something that I can, bring to the table with some of the experiences that I've had, but also just a lot of the new thought process and ways of approaching it, and that energy from our team has really helped me grow as a leader.
Is there anyone in particular, any kind of group of people that you can point to that have really kind of shaped you and changed you while you've been here?
Yeah. You being one, for sure. And then Mac Mazeski, Mac has been a real key leader in our company. Mac is, we're fortunate to have him working with our partner at HC Intellect on the revenue cycle side. Once again, the ability to pressure test, to think, to look at things differently. And then, somebody who's been here that is part of the executive leadership team, Jessica Sorsby. Jessica's level of expertise, detail, positivity, and ability to really develop systems to look at what we do have really had an impact on me, and so appreciative for everybody that has touched my time here. You and Mac and Jessica definitely had an impact.
Do you think of any advice that maybe any of the three of those folks have given you, or anyone else in your career has given that has particularly resonated, or maybe some advice that you like to share with others?
Yeah, I think, and we kind of live that. I do think that one of the things that I do tell people, and then the people on our team have been able to really demonstrate, is that people do respect what you inspect. So if we care about something, we need to show it too, and not just provide lip service. If it's something that matters, then pay attention to it, recognize it, monitor it, reward it, whatever tactic we're going to take around it. But if we're going to take the time to really take a look at it, make sure that it counts. And I think that we live that. I can get into real granular examples of some things that are extremely important to our business, right? Like take the credentialing department, very important, and seeing that level of granularity that when Jessica took that team over and building the tools to monitor and make sure everything's on pace, and then the amount of recognizing when people do well and catch people doing well. And that's advice that I would give. Do good and you'll do well. Do the right thing, be transparent, be open, and we'll continue to have a great company.
Kind of along that same vein, is there anything that particularly stands out that you admire about either the company or the team?
Yeah. I not only admire it, but I also sometimes try to rein it in. We have people that are so willing that it's always yes, and they don't want to say no. The can-do mentality is something that, I've met people obviously many times in my career that have very much of a can-do mentality. We have a whole team. We have a organizational mindset of can-do. And sometimes, I worry about that a little bit because there's never no. But just the dedication, the passion, the compassion, I definitely admire. But I want to make sure that people balance their personal lives too. But yes, so the dedication our team has, the hours they put in, and that they truly care about what they're doing.
Definitely sometimes burning the candle from both ends to make it work and to honor all those commitments. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Any company moments or traditions that stand out for you?
Yeah. Those who know me know that I love interacting with people. I love, observing and helping and molding human behavior. And one of the best opportunities we get for that is when we have our yearly meeting where we bring in, which we just had in St. Louis, which was awesome, where we have not only our executive team, but we have our directors, we have our managers and people that are leading departments. We have everybody in a room together. And one of the best compliments that I received for our team, that was just touching base with one of our directors of a department, and she said to me, she's like, Mike, when I hear you guys saying things, bringing everybody together and seeing Dr. Geith speak to us and you and the team, and it all started really making sense, and it all came together, and I was so inspired by that. So having that meeting to be able to, even though we have great transparency, we're a very, very unique and I think very strong remote company. When we have that touch point, when we have everybody together, I think it's something that really stands out for me, and that's a great tradition.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like every time we leave that meeting, I leave super energized and with a ton of great ideas. I always joke with Pete that, he every time I see him, he has $100,000 idea, so I love to keep that up.
Owen, the other thing that stands out for me too, and which is coming up, is our Aspen Summit at
Yeah.
the Aspen Conference, and that's where we bring in the people outside of DxTx, our physicians, our APPs, our practice administrators, and we have a full day together, and we learn, we interact, we mingle, we network, share best practices. I really love that too, that we do each year.
Yeah, agreed. Shifting gears a little bit we always talk about our customer is the physician and the practice and serving the people that serve. But I would like to hear a little bit about kind of your perspective on some of the patients that we treat kind of as a broader organization. And is there any kind of message that you would want to tell people who are, in pain or experiencing pain, maybe thinking about coming to one of our offices?
Yeah. This is one of the things that I'm absolutely most proud of, is that we have a shared belief system. We have a shared philosophy to treat the source of the pain and not mask the pain. And we have, I would tell any patient, we have a lot of testimonials, and we need to do a better job really of getting those out so people can see how our patients are impacted by the interventions. But what I'd also tell people is, even if you tried 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and didn't get necessarily the relief that you had hoped, this field is developing as faster than any field out there. Our space is really developing. The amount of products and interventions and techniques that are being developed and rolled out just seems to be continuous. And our physicians are at the top of their game. One of our things that we comment on a lot is having our physicians operate at the top of their license. And we're fortunate they do. And our patients are getting outstanding treatment from just world-class physicians that really, really know the latest and greatest in interventional pain management.
Some of those patient testimonials, it's not that we're helping them climb up Mount Everest, right? It's that those aren't the ones that are most moving. It's the ones where someone's able to bring their groceries in by themselves, for the first time. Some of those everyday tasks that we often take for granted, but for folks that are in pain, those are huge milestones for them.
And I know you, Owen, as well as me, we've been inside of a lot of ORs. We've seen a lot of these procedures. But still to this day, I really like when I'm visiting the practices, if I get the opportunity to go in and just observe a procedure that one of our physicians do. It gives me context. And, I watched our CCO, Dr. Sheel Patel, do a procedure that the person came in, that they wheeled them in. And this was dramatic. The person walked out. It was just so impactful, and just seeing that, it just reminds me when we're back, when we're looking at benchmarks and numbers and productivity, and to just with my own eyes see what they do on a day-to-day basis is just super impactful and inspiring to me.
And shifting gears a little bit more to the personal side, would love to hear just kind of what are you passionate about outside of the office, outside of work? Any hobbies or hidden talents that you are willing to share?
I will say hobbies. I would use the word talent loosely. So, but there's definitely some things I enjoy doing. I really enjoy, carpentry. It's something that I've kind of done on the side. It's relaxing to me. So I've built decks before and done trim, and I've just really enjoyed that. But also I'm just an avid sports fan. I love golf. We don't get enough time to golf here in Michigan, but I love golf. I love spending time with my family on a boat, and bike riding. My wife loves to run. I don't love to run, but I will walk, but do that. But I would say that that's a hobby. But enjoy biking, getting outdoors. I'm a huge hockey fan. I was a hockey player. My son's a hockey player. I love hockey. So Stanley Cup finals are going on this time of year, so I really enjoy that.
I heard that you have a decades-long goal-scoring streak in hockey. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've played more decades than you can imagine, but I always had a goal that I wanted to. I turned 60 last July, and I said I want to score a goal in my 60s. So last September, I scored a goal in my 60s. So check that box, and I haven't played a game since. I was about ready for retirement, but I wanted to score in my 60s, and I did.
We'll see you in 10 or so years. Got to keep that streak alive.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And I'm going to kind of shift gears one more time to a little bit more of like a rapid fire round. So I think first couple questions here, what's something that has made you smile recently?
Man, Owen, I smile every day, but hearing just some of the achievements, hearing the relief, I smiled when my daughter shared her smile of just taking her step one exam in med school last week. That made me smile.
That's awesome. What are you most excited about professionally in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm so excited about a lot of the training programs that we have put together, and once again, to help bring our network partners together. One of those being a medical director leadership symposium led by Dr. Geith and Dr. Patel, that will be working on a weekly basis with all of our medical directors to really raise everybody's game and that everybody's aligned. And I'm so excited to see that being executed over the next quarter.
And how about personally? What's most exciting in the next 6 to 12 months?
Personally, just continuing to be a part of driving growth with DxTx. That's a big part of it. But then on the personal side, just seeing, I talk a lot about my kids, but just seeing as they continue to progress and have success and hit, career goals and educational goals that they have, that just really, that gets me excited.
Favorite book?
Radical Candor.
Favorite meal?
Steak.
Steak, okay. Favorite vacation spot?
Prague.
Prague, all right. That was a recent trip, right?
Yeah. Last October, it was fantastic.
And then how about your favorite sports team?
Detroit Red Wings.
Detroit Red Wings, all right. Any closing thoughts that you'd want to share with the broader DxTx team?
Yeah. I think it's important that we all live our company values, our mission, that we practice it every day. I know we manage to it. We evaluate to those values. And the more we can cascade those throughout the organization to the 500 plus employees that we have in our network, I think that's critical. Continue to do good and we'll do well. Do the right thing. Continue to raise everybody's skill level of competency so that everybody's functioning at the top of their game. That would be, and that what that does is that creates differentiation. And I do believe we're different than anybody else in the space, and that makes us a destination of choice. So when we want the top physicians, top APPs, we also want the top MAs, top front desk, top nurses, all the different functions that we provide.
Well, Mike, thank you for taking time out of your super busy schedule. It's great to have this conversation, and hopefully it's helpful for other folks that are listening as well.
Thanks, Owen. I really appreciate it.